The highway. We're going off the highway today with Matthew Croasmun. How you doing, Matthew?
I'm doing well. Good to see you.
Thank you. Yeah, good to see you, man. Hey, so Matthew is the director of research and publications for the Yale Center for Faith and Culture, which is just the most outstanding title of all time. So you're kind of living at Yale, man. You're like living in smart people land. That's incredible.
It's a good place to hang out. We have a great team here.
So Matthew and I met last year when I came out to Yale to do a few projects around secularism and following Jesus as a concept. People who call themselves secularists and yet want to sort of like align their life with Jesus. And is that possible? And how would the church respond to such a thing? Matthew, I'd just love to hear kind of your thoughts on secularism and Jesus following.
Yeah, I think we're at a really interesting time in our culture right now, where we have the way that Charles Taylor talks about it, the philosopher, he says, look, to live in a secular age isn't to live at a time where religious belief isn't possible. It's to live at a time where to not engage in religious belief is possible. Which really what that means then is that all of a sudden, all the kind of answers to the question about what makes for a good life, what makes a life meaningful, what counts as good or as meaningful or as purposeful to begin with, all those questions are suddenly up for grabs, and we have to answer them intentionally in ways that maybe before those answers would have been supplied for us from culture at large. And so I think that's actually a really interesting place to think about what it is to follow Jesus. To think, oh wait, I have to. I'm already confronted with this question. And a life following Jesus is a life that kind of ends up living out answers to the questions of what makes life meaningful, what makes for a good life, what makes a life worth living. And so it's an exciting time to actually have conversations about what it is to follow Jesus.
And you're a Jesus guy, right?
Yeah.
You're a theist.
Yes.
You're not an atheist. You're not a secularist.
Right.
And yet, is it okay for us to sort of make space for non-theists to want to follow Jesus?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think Jesus made space for all kinds of people who believed any number of different things about Him, about God, about the world, to come and follow Him, and they discovered kind of who He was, and not that these thoughts about who God is or what the world is and what the world is for aren't important, but I think the model we have from Jesus is that a lot of those things are worked out along the way. I love the guy who Jesus heals of blindness in John. And he goes and he's being questioned by the religious authorities, and they ask him, who was this man? Was he a sinner who healed you on the Sabbath? And the guy says, I don't know whether he's a sinner or not. What I know is that I was blind and now I see. And so it always strikes me like if we were going to make a list of the theological things that one ought to know about Jesus to kind of be in the box, whatever the box is. Knowing whether or not Jesus is a sinner might be pretty high up on anybody's list, right? And here it is. It seems to be possible to kind of remain agnostic even on the question of whether Jesus is a sinner, whether Jesus kind of is totally on the wrong track or not. So if that's possible, it seems to me totally possible to be in any number of other places on our metaphysical commitments, whether we might think about God or not think about God, and still hear Jesus' invitation to us to come follow Him. And for what it's worth, I find it so valuable actually to I'm not just a Jesus follower. I'll admit it. I'm a Christian, right? I'm formed by the church. I planted a church, helped pastor a church. I would not be who I am without the church, right? I'm a Christian. I'm formed by the church, but I love following Jesus alongside folks who weren't formed by the church, who don't share a bunch of the commitments that I think are really important for the church to share. So I think we obviously, wherever we're coming from, we're always going to have blind spots. And if we only hang out with people who share our blind spots, then we'll never become aware of those things. And if we spend time with secular folk who are wanting to follow Jesus, at least in my experience, I find I learn so much new about who Jesus is and about what following Him might mean for my life.
That's so great. So much of what we were doing out there last year was talking about these things in the context of friendship. And there's a C.S. Lewis quote from The Four Loves where he says, the essence of friendship, I'm not going to get it exact, but essence of friendship is not that we agree on all the same answers, but that we appreciate all the same questions or value all the same questions. And in that, that's where the richest friendship can be found. And I've found that to be true in my life. And I really appreciate your comments, man.
Yeah.
Everybody, that's Matthew Croasmun. You can find him at the Yale Center for Faith and Culture. Thanks so much. This is Off the Highway.